In this video, I am going to be talking about C++ objects state, empty state, and use of empty state. I already have this code here. I am going to be using this code to explain object state, empty state of the object, and use of empty state. First, let me explain this code. It has a class called country with attribute mname and marea, and public members, setter function to set the name and area into the attributes, getter function to return the name, and getter function to return area, and query function to display the name and area. And these are the functions member functions defined outside the class. And in the main function, the creation of object, invocation of set function, passing of the data into it, getting the name and area and displaying the name and area on the output stream on the screen, and calling display function to display the data. Now I'm going to talk about state. Many times you might have heard state of mind. Right? What is state of mind? If you look into the dictionary, particularly the Cambridge dictionary, it says state of mind is a person's person's mood and the effect that mood has This is the definition I could find in the Cambridge dictionary. So state of mind is something that determines your thinking and your behavior. If you are in good state of mind, then your thinking will be clear, you will not be confused, and your behavior will be better towards the people. Now if you are in a bad state of mind, your behavior is not going to be something that people want, and you may be thinking something that not appropriate or can not sometimes it may be harmful to you and to the people. It's important to be in a good state of mind. And what determines the state of mind? In other words, what actually determines your mood? The thing is that your brain has a memory, it has a memory to store information. If for example, if you hear about your very close and dear one unfortunate passing or dying, information about your very close dear one dying, in that case, on that day you are going to be not very good state of mind, because your brain is holding that information is residing in your brain, and that actually determines your mood, the state of your mood. If you hear about some different news, for example, you got you're playing a lottery a lottery and you won a jackpot. In the morning you wake up and you got the news that you have won the jackpot, and at that time you are going to be very elated, very happy. So your mood is going to be very friendly, very happy. So what determines that mood is the information you have in your brain about lottery. Right, so if you have information about the lottery jackpot win, your mood is going to be very good. If you have information about right, in this case you are not going to be in good mood. What this indicates is that the state is determined by the information that is residing in your brain. Right, if one day if you hear this sort of information, then your mood becomes very bad, and a few days after it fades away. This information, your memory actually starts forgetting this thing, and gradually your mood improves. And when you win the lottery jackpot, then new information comes in and you get elated. So the amount of information and type of information that you are holding in your brain actually determines the state of your mind. Similarly, we have a class here, and we have object created, and when object is created, a memory space is allocated for its attribute, and if memory space is allocated, then that memory space will hold some data, because all the memory space is actually organized in the form of bits 1010, and you cannot have anything other than 1 and 0. So the combination of the bits that exist in that memory space actually determines the data carried by of the object's data. So in this case in this case memory was only created, no data copied. So it can hold some random data, some garbage value. Now at this point we set certain data into the attributes India and this number. Now the state of this object at this point is going to be what do you say, garbage or random or whatever term you want to use, something that that indicates that that state is not useful. Okay, in that state using object is not good, not healthy. Now once we set data into it, then object turns into a different one, which you can use. This is it contains valid data, so this object is usable, or object in this state is usable. Now if I do something like this, city not India but INDI, let's say INDIB 3287263. If I copy this data into it, then all the characters are same, only the problem is one character is different. This data is also same. Even this much difference actually makes the object into different state. The state of object at this point is in one state. At this point it turns into another state. Right. Not only this character occupies 1 byte, 8 bits. Even if there is difference in 1 bit, then the state becomes different, right? So the data that is a copy that currently exists in the memory space allocated for the object actually determines the state of the object. And the way that object behaves depends on the state. For example, if it is in this state, it will display one outcome. If it is in a different state, it will display the output. The invocation of this function will result in a different output. So state determines the outcome or behavior of the object. Now let us switch to empty state. Empty state is a special state. Let me talk about empty state. This is a special state where you have data in the object, which you have data in the object which is in your control. Right, the data in the object, you know what is stored, but it is not a valid data to be used. Right, that means you know what data that object is storing, but the data is not valid to be used. In that case, we call the state of the object to be in the empty state. Usually that is determined by setting certain data into it. For example, in this case, the object is created, but you don't know what is data stored, so it is not valid, but the data information that is stored is not in your control. Okay, but if you set this data into some default values, some value that you feel that it is not valid, but you know, I can check, I can see the data and I can tell that this object is not valid. If you are confident about that situation, when I say situation, I mean if you are confident about looking into the data and telling that this is not a valid state, or if you have set the data and you are confident of the fact that the object is not a valid state, then we call that object in the empty state, the object being in the empty state. If I set manually, I can set in this object in the empty state by setting the name that is a valid as a string, but not valid as a name, because empty string is not a valid name for a country, right? I cannot imagine a country with the name where there is not a single character. And the area, I cannot also imagine a country which has area equals to 0. If area equals to 0, then there is no country, right? So I could use 0 square meter as an area, and empty string as the name, and I can consider this as the data to be stored in the object to be in the empty state. Right. So again, if you should determine what is the actually empty value or default value for the data, and you can use that data to set into the object that will make the object to be in the empty state. Now let us move on to the top. Once we know what is empty state, then what is its usefulness, why we actually need to have empty state, object in empty state, right? So let us talk about the use of empty state. I'm going to be commenting out this. Now I have, let me remove this statement, and also just remove this part. Only I set data and display data. Let me compile this code, see the output, and I will go from there. Now you have output displayed as expected. Going back to the code. Now what if I actually this data and -1 and call this display function, right? If I set this data and -1 and call the display function, then what will happen in the output? So you can see name is printed empty, area is something that is printed, looks like valid, right? Sometimes the thing that is set in the name may also amount to a sequence of characters which may appear like a valid name. So and if the object has this sort of data, then sometimes the program code may consider that as a valid data and start using it. So we want to prevent this invalid data from being used, right? If you want to prevent this invalid data from being used, then what we can do is first determine the default values of the data and set the object in the empty state. This will set object in empty state, and then after that, and inside the logic of this function, sometimes if the area passed is -20, negative number, that is not valid value. That may lead to the problems if that data is copied into the attributes, and if the string is also something that is not valid, that may also lead to the problem, right? Therefore when setting the data, what we can do is I'm going to focus on only default state. So if our state is default, if the object in the default state carries empty string and 0 area, then I don't want that data to display. I want things in better to put things to keep things in our control. When I say this, I mean I don't want to display data that is not valid. If data is not valid, then I want to display some string, for example invalid data, something like this. so that it will give better information to the user of this class. So I want to check whether the data is in empty state or not. First, you make sure that object is set to empty state. It is recommended that you invoke this function immediately after you create the object, so that there is no other statements, instruction or code that makes use of this CT object. And once you the object is set into the empty state, then we can check that empty state. For example, if the length of the string is positive and is also positive, then you only display the data. Otherwise you display some default, the error information, which maybe data not valid or invalid data or some other text message you want to display, right? This is the expression which actually determines whether the object is in empty state or not. If it is in empty state, this will evaluate to false. If it is not in empty state, this will evaluate to true, and this line will be executed. Similarly, we can also make changes to this function. We want to return the valid data if this name is valid, is not empty. Otherwise we can return some message, right? So if another way of checking whether it's valid or not is to check the first character not equals to null character. You return name, otherwise right, otherwise return invalid name. Similarly, you can also check have similar checking of the area before you return. If m area positive, then return area, otherwise you need to return unsigned. You cannot return message like this. This is unsigned value, so some value that indicates that the data is not valid, maybe -1, something like this. So right, so if once these functions are actually return this way, or then that can be used in the client code to determine whether this the things that are written by this function should be used, applied or not. Okay, to summarize, I have talked about object state, I talked about empty state, and I also talked about the use of empty state.